Could Article 37 of the Kenyan Constitution be the most misunderstood of all constitutional provisions in the 2010 Constitution of the People's Republic of Kenya? In any constitutional dispensation, one of the greatest challenges usually exhibited by the populace is the lack of understanding or appreciating constitutional provisions. Whatever the Constitution provides for, the Constitution regulates by what the Constitution calls the constitutional threshold. So a constitutional threshold is that regulator that puts upon you a responsibility for you to discharge, that once you have discharged that responsibility, then that constitutional provision kicks to work on your behalf. All constitutional provisions have constitutional thresholds either in the construction of that provision or the neighborhood of that provision. So it's very important whenever you're looking at a constitutional provision to ask yourself, at this point, what are the thresholds that I need to meet? Thresholds are sometimes known as requirements or sometimes expectations. What are the expectations that this document, this living document, has on me today? That in order for me to access such, I need to discharge a constitutional duty, a constitutional mandate, a constitutional threshold, a constitutional requirement. It's very important that in order for you to appreciate and maximize a constitutional provision, you equally have to have an awareness of the corresponding level of duty imposed upon you. It is that duty that when you discharge it, enables you to access the privileges, the benefits within that freedom or within that provision. This question asks us to understand Article 37 when it is read with Article 24. What that means is, in order for you to fully appreciate Article 37, we need to restrict ourselves to the provisions of Article 24. And so the question is this: does Article 24 regulate Article 37, or can Article 37 regulate itself? So it's important that we now turn our attention to Article 37. Article 37 is assembly, demonstration, picketing, and petition. Every person has the right. At this point, kindly allow me to introduce 4 important words: rights, Bill of Rights, freedoms, and fundamental freedoms. These 4 things are not the same in as much as on their face value they appear to be the same. For the sake of the subject matter at hand, allow me just to restrict myself to rights and freedoms. Freedoms are privileges that are defined by the state. So the state defines certain privileges and benefits for its citizenry, and those privileges that the state has defined, the state commits itself to manifesting or to performing them. So once the citizen has discharged a duty, a citizen can enjoy a freedom. But when we are talking of rights, rights are things, or they are privileges that the state can only acknowledge, but the state has nothing to do with them, because the state did not contribute in you getting them. Let us look at Article 19.3a. Article 19.3a says that the rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bill of Rights, A, belong to each individual and are not granted by the state. So that means the state has to restrict itself on the things that the state has defined, the things that the states can regulate, from the things the state has nothing to do with. The right to life is one such area. The state did not participate in any way, you getting your life, and the state should not participate in any way you being deprived of that life. So it's important when we are looking at Article 37, we ask ourselves, according to the clusters of what we have defined, is that a freedom that is masquerading as a right, or is that a right? So let's look at Article 37. Every person has the right, peaceably and unarmed, to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions to public authorities. Now, we started by understanding one of the challenges in any constitutional dispensation. In order for an individual to unlock the provisions in this Article 37, then the first question is, might there be a threshold that is imposed on people that you must discharge before you are allowed to assemble? Then we go back to the same article and we ask ourselves, every person has the right, and then there is a comma. A comma, according to grammar, is an interruption of thought. So when we are looking at it, peaceable and unarmed, we ask ourselves, what role does peaceable and unarmed play in order for you to access an assembly? So the article ought to have read, every person has the right to assemble. But before you assemble, there is an interruption there. That interruption is what we are calling as an inherent threshold within that article. So in order for you to access assembly, you must qualify that you're peaceable and you are unarmed. That is the threshold that we have to meet. Once you have qualified that I am peaceable, I am unarmed, then a public authority ought to give you the right to access that freedom. So that freedom now spells that you can assemble. There are two ways that we can interpret Article 37. The first way to appreciate Article 37 is that Article 37 is an omnibus article. That means that we take everything omnibus. There is also another interpretation to Article 37 that everything is qualified. So this is what it means. That in Article 37, when we are approaching it from the omnibus approach, where everything we are taking it wholesome, then it means that once you have qualified to be peaceable and unarmed, now you can picket. Now you can assemble. Now you can demonstrate. Now you can present your public petition to public authorities. Now, those are options that you have. That is the omnibus approach. The qualifier approach is this, that when an individual has met the threshold, then there is another qualifier for every individual to meet. And this is the qualifier, that once you have met the threshold, now you are assembling, but you are not assembling for assembly's sake. You are assembling for an intended result. And the intended result is to present your petition to public authority. So that qualifier approach of interpreting that provision holds that once you have met that threshold, that threshold imposes on you another duty, that now you are assembling. Then the tail end of your assembly is to present a public petition. The tail end of you picketing is to present a petition to a public authority. The tail end of you discharging demonstration is for you now to present a petition to a public authority. That qualifier interpretation is the one that most people do not discharge. And that is why Article 37 is highly misunderstood. Because what is the tail end of Article 37? Article 37, if I was to go by my approach, I would say Article 37 is a qualifier. And the qualifier is this, that once you have met that threshold only becomes a passageway. And that passageway now places upon you a higher duty. And the duty is this, whenever you're picketing, you ought to have a petition. Whenever you're demonstrating, you ought to have a petition. And whenever you are looking at assembly, then you equally have to have a demonstration. So that is very important, that we need to understand what is the nature of Article 37. Because that word nature, we are also going to interact with it when we are looking at Article 24. And the beauty of Article 24, if you look at it, this is what it reads in Article 24. Limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms. We had started by demonstrating that there's a huge difference between rights and there are other institutions or there are other privileges that now we are calling fundamental freedoms. And Article 24:1 says, a right or fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights shall not be limited except by law. And then only to the extent that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable. So reasonable and justifiable now becomes the threshold upon which a right can be withdrawn, upon which a right can be deprived to an individual. So the person withholding that right from you has to be reasonable and has to be justifiable. So that is what now we're asking ourselves. When someone wants to deny you the right to picket, what is the reasonableness? What is the justifiability that they have to deprive you of that right? In an open and democratic society based on human dignity. So this is how we are going to say. You remember when I told us that there are thresholds, then those thresholds then pre-imposes other requirements that you need to discharge. So the person denying you the right to picket has to be restrained on that. Even in you being deprived, that deprivation should not deny you human dignity. That deprivation should not deny you equality, and that deprivation should not deny you freedom. So it's important to ask ourselves, then when an individual seeks to deprive you of you exercising Article 37, because that is what we are dealing with in the present subject matter, then we ask ourselves, then what is the greater duty? The greater duty is not deprivation. The greater duty is to restrict deprivation on those three major important requirements. It has to be on human dignity, it has to be on equality and freedom, taking into account all relevant factors, including the nature of the right. You remember when we had said something about nature? So this is now where the qualifier of Part D of Article 37 comes into play, whereby now we are restricting ourselves that the reason why we are picketing now to provide and now to share a public petition. We have generated a petition that at the tail end of picketing, we have a petition. At the tail end of an assembly, we have a petition. At the tail end of us demonstrating, we have a petition. That is what it's called, the nature of that right, the nature of that freedom. The importance, that is at Article 24:1b, the importance of the purpose of the limitation. Now that is the justifiability and the reasonableness, the nature and the extent of the limitation. So that is very important for us to understand that Article 37 is not an inherent right. Article 37 is not absolute, but Article 37 is absolute to the extent that an individual has only met the basic threshold, and that basic threshold pre-imposes on that individual other requirements. And the requirements that we have in Article 37 is that at the end of it, you have to present petitions to public authority. That becomes the nature of you exercising that right. That becomes the nature of you exercising that fundamental freedom. I would invite you to kindly just address yourself, just go to this Article 24 and address your attention to Article 24. And just in case I might have overlooked something or I might have neglected something entirely, Kindly let's interact in the comment section and let's see. Mr. Guang, you might have neglected this, and this is my appeal. This is what I feel about Article 37. This is what I feel about Article 37 when it's read with Article 24. My name is Ogwang, and just in case you have reached this far, kindly consider rewarding me with a like, a share, and let's interact in the comment section. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care. God bless, and bye-bye.